Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Launchpad and our live coverage of Jupiter 3 EchoStar 24. I'm Dakota Wachter, a Space Coast correspondent here at TLP. Our mission is to inform and inspire the explorers of tomorrow because we believe that space is better together. We hope you're all well and appreciate you tuning in. We're counting down at T-minus 39 minutes, 10 seconds till SpaceX launches Falcon Heavy from historic Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Tonight's launch is carrying SpaceX customer Hughes' next-generation internet satellite, Jupiter 3, also known as EchoStar 24. This satellite is set to revolutionize connectivity across North and South America. Hughes has a rich history of engineering innovation that spans several decades. Starting in the 1980s, they developed the revolutionary two-way very small aperture terminal, VSAT, a breakthrough in satellite communication technology. In the 1990s, they further pioneered their efforts by inventing satellite internet, transforming the way we connect with the world. Their contributions continued in the 2000s when they launched the first modern-era telecommunications satellite, setting new standards for the industry. Jupiter 3, known as EchoStar 24, is the next milestone in Hughes' satellite fleet. It boasts an ultra-high-density satellite, UHDS, that will effectively double the capacity of their existing Jupiter satellites. It will support a wide array of services, including in-flight Wi-Fi, enabling travelers to stay connected even at 30,000 feet, maritime connections, and even enterprise networks, enabling businesses to operate more efficiently. The satellite will serve as a crucial backhaul support for mobile network operations, MNOs, and enhancing cellular connectivity in remote areas. Community Wi-Fi solutions will also benefit from Jupiter 3, bridging the digital divide and connecting underserved regions. Now, tonight's Falcon 9 is made up of 3 Falcon 9 first stages and a single second stage. SpaceX will be flying booster 1064 and 1065 as side boosters, both on their third flights, and they'll fly back here to the Space Coast and land at landing zone 1 and 2. Booster 1074 is tonight's core stage and is a brand new booster. Tonight it will make its first and last flight. After separation, it will be expended into the Atlantic Ocean. Now, after reaching orbit tonight, Jupiter 3's deployment is expected to occur about 3 hours and 28 minutes into flight after it reaches geostationary orbit. Currently sitting at T-minus 36 minutes and 58 seconds, second stage RP-1 loading has begun. Now, tonight's launch marks the 264th launch for SpaceX in its storied history and their 51st launch this year. And as we count down to launch, we are answering your questions live, so send them in at the chat by tagging us at the Launchpad. And while we're counting down to launch, make sure to take a moment to follow us on X and Facebook and join us on Discord. That's where the TLP community hangs out between launches, news stories, and talks about everything space. As well, you can check out our website, tlpnetwork.com. Check out all of our news stories, learn more about the crew, and even check out our store. Now, as the second stage is fueling up with RP1 currently, coming up at about 18 minutes, 30 seconds, we're going to be looking at second stage is going to start its LOX load. Now, if you haven't yet, make sure you engage that like button and subscribe to never miss another TLP live launch coverage, space news update, or exclusive 101 interview right here at the Launchpad Network. Future Santa Joe asks, "How is the rocket? Is the problem fixed?" As far as we know, there actually wasn't a vehicle issue. Back on Wednesday, it related to an abort criteria, so that could have been anything from FTS to range to there's a numerous amount of issues that could have been. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Launchpad, and we are live here from Launch Complex 39A press site at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, awaiting the launch of Hughes' Jupiter 3 EchoStar 24 internet satellite aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 Heavy. SpaceX is currently targeting 11:04 p.m. Eastern Time, while we are currently sitting at T-minus 30 minutes 24 seconds. Now, a fun fact about tonight's flight, this is the heaviest payload that Falcon 9's Falcon Heavy, any Falcon series rocket has ever carried up to an orbital plane. So that means that second stage is going to be using every last bit Delta V8 can get out of it, as well as the core stage. Dennis Poe asks, "Is the bottom rocket going to land back on Earth?" Yes, sir. Both the side boosters are going to be landing back here at landing zone 1 and 2 at the Kennedy Space Center, while the core stage will be expended and fall back into the ocean. And as we count down to launch, we are answering your questions live, so send them in the chat by tagging us at the launch pad. Now, coming up here in about 6 minutes, the transporter erector at T minus 22 minutes, or TE line, which feeds propellant to the stage 2, will be undergoing a purge before LOX loading begins. So we'll keep an eye out for that at T minus 22 minutes. Once again, catching up on the chat. If you have any questions for us, tag us at the launch pad. Go ahead and let us know where you guys are watching from tonight. Throw it in the chat, tag us at the launch pad, and once again, if you have any questions, go ahead and tag us. We're sitting out here at the press site, pad 39A, watching currently RP1 loading, getting ready for second stage LOX loading beginning soon. Ooh, we got everyone coming in from around the world. We got Dennis in Florida. We've got Santa Joe in Illinois. Edion, forgive me if I mispronounced that, from Sweden. Gavin, one of our wonderful rocket chases here in Titusville. Mitzi's in Pinellas Park. Luke is in Shiner, Texas. We've even got Lunar Sparkles in Sonoma County, California. Artavius in Louisiana, and Les in San Antonio. Space is better together, y'all. So when we can make this a global effort, we can truly bring some unity back to this planet. And we can truly see the stars as one. And that's what this is all about. Uniting our planet, uniting our species, and progressing us into the future. In the spirit of peace. I also see that we have a few folks from Jacksonville in here. I myself, Dakota, am from Jacksonville, Florida, before I moved down here for TLP. It's great to see some old neighbors of mine in here. Edeon, yes, this is the same pad where the Crew Dragons launch from, as well as the Cargo Dragons. The Unknown Protogen asks, what type of ship, if there is one, does the pick up parts that land in the ocean? Currently, there are no direct recoveries of the boosters that are expended, but otherwise they use a very special kind of drone ship to catch the boosters as they land out in the ocean. Now we're coming up on T minus 22 minutes. At that point, the transporter erector line, which feeds propellant to the stage 2, is going to be undergoing a purge before LOX loading begins at T minus 16 minutes. Mitchell, the SpaceX launch pads, just like all of the private launch pads out here, are leased to those specific space companies as they currently use them. So Stoke has their own pad, ULA has their own pad, SpaceX has their own pads, NASA still has their pad. And as always, you can go ahead and tag us at the launch pad with your live questions. So Rishi, the boosters will either land on the drone ship in the ocean, depending on the mission type, or they'll land here at landing zone 1 and 2 on land at Kennedy Space Center. Tonight, the side boosters will be landing at landing zone 1 and 2. Meanwhile, the core stage, they're using every last bit of Delta V out of that rocket. And so it is going to be expended after all is said and done. Now, if you're just joining us, welcome to the launch pad. My name is Dakota, and we are live from the Launch Complex 39A press site at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, awaiting the launch of Hughes Jupiter 3 EchoStar 24 satellite aboard a SpaceX Falcon Heavy. SpaceX is currently targeting 11:04 p.m., meaning we are currently at T minus 20 minutes and 25 seconds. If y'all have any questions, please tag us at the launch pad. We'll be more than happy to ask or answer. Zach as well. He's out and about having a wonderful adventure with some
Stage
friends
2,
tonight, so I'm
RP1
filling
load
in
is
for him.
complete.
But yes, to all those who are worried, Zach is alive and well and just fine. By all means, Rishi. So tonight's mission is a satellite made by Hughes. They are one of the industry leaders in internet satellites going back to the 1980s. Tonight's satellite, Jupiter 3 EchoStar 24, it boasts an ultra-high density satellite, UHDS, that effectively doubles the capacity of their existing Jupiter satellites. It'll support a wide array of services, including in-flight Wi-Fi, maritime connections, enterprising, and all those great things. It's also going to be supporting community and Wi-Fi solutions and effectively doubling the coverage that Hughes currently serves with their other Jupiter satellites. GM, oh yes, sir. We all play Kerbal. We were actually playing Kerbal out here at the press site the other day. KSP in front of the VAB at KSC. It's an absolute blast. We'll be handing it over to SpaceX's feed here soon. We're currently sitting at the press site with our own independent feed, about 3.5 miles away. And nets are reporting that Stage 2 RP-1 load is complete. All right, with that, we're going to be handing over to SpaceX. We appreciate y'all watching our feed so far. Appreciate y'all tuning in.
Cast of the Jupiter 3 mission. I'm Ronnie Foreman, and I'm joining you to follow our Falcon Heavy rocket liftoff from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. If you've been following along, you know that we stood down from Wednesday's launch attempt with an abort called around the T-1 minute mark. This was due to a valve that stuck open on one of the side boosters, preventing us from performing pressurization of a rocket component. We replaced the valve and checkouts were successful. So it looks like we are good to go today as long as the weather cooperates with us. So our team is working towards an on-time liftoff of 11:04 p.m. Eastern. Today's mission is for our customer EchoStar and their Hughes Network Systems division, and will mark SpaceX's third Falcon Heavy mission this year and sixth operational Falcon Heavy mission overall. And if you've been following along, this is also our second mission in less than 24 hours. Late last night or early this morning, depending on where you're watching from, we were fortunate enough to find some good weather down in Florida and launched our 50th mission so far of 2023. We had liftoff at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time from our neighboring pad, Space Launch Complex 40. Back on 39A tonight, with that great view you have on your screen, we have the Hughes Jupiter 3 EchoStar 24, or Jupiter 3 for short, on board the second stage. Jupiter 3 was built by Maxar and will be the largest commercial communications satellite ever to launch into geostationary orbit, weighing over 9 tons. Once operational, Jupiter 3 will help meet demand for HughesNet satellite internet in rural areas of the United States and Latin America, as well as demand for Explore service for rural customers in Canada. In addition to supporting enterprise and government applications, Jupiter 3 will also power higher-speed satellite internet service plans in North America, while helping to expand and enhance HughesNet across Mexico, Brazil, and South America. We'll have more about our customer and their payload later on during the show, so be sure to stay tuned. Now at just under T-minus 13 minutes, all systems are currently go for an on-time liftoff of 11:04 p.m. Eastern. The vehicle started propellant loading around the T-minus 50-minute mark and is nearly fully loaded with propellants. The range is ready to support, and we have a 25% chance of violation for weather today, but we're moving forward with the countdown to see if we can find some clear weather in time for liftoff. Of course, if for some reason we don't launch today, we do have a backup opportunity tomorrow at the same time. So as you can see on your screen, although a little bit obscured by that LOX cloud, Falcon Heavy is essentially 3 Falcon 9 rockets strapped together, which means it can carry much larger payloads, not only to Earth's orbit, but to the Moon and Mars as well. Like the Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy is a 2-stage launch vehicle. But the big difference is that the Falcon Heavy first stage is comprised of 3 cores, and Falcon 9 has only 1. That means that Falcon Heavy has 28 engines in total. Each one of the 3 boosters has 9 M1D engines at the bottom, making for a total of 27 engines across the center core and both side boosters, which you have a great view of on your screen right now. The 28th engine, of course, is a Merlin vacuum engine on board the second stage, and that's what will power the payload to its final targeted orbit today. Altogether, the Merlin 1D engines at the base of Falcon Heavy produce 5 million pounds of thrust, which is equal to 18 747s at takeoff. In fact, the engines produce so much power that we don't run them all at full thrust at once until after liftoff. About 2.5 minutes into flight, the 2 side boosters will separate from the center core and come back to Earth for simultaneous landings at Landing Zone 1 and Landing Zone 2. Each of the side boosters on either side of the center core are flying for the 3rd time on today's mission, having previously supported USSF 44 and 67. If successfully recovered, the side boosters will be refurbished and used again on a future Falcon Heavy mission. Similar to previous launches, we'll be conducting a 1-engine entry burn today. This allows us to shorten the length of the entry burn for the side boosters, ultimately allowing us to increase performance. And speaking of increased performance, we will not be attempting to recover the center core today. So if you look closely at your screen, you'll see that the center core doesn't have landing legs or grid fins attached. That's because this mission requires more performance than we have to be able to recover the center core, and that landing hardware isn't needed. But don't worry, today's launch should still be a very exciting one, especially if you're joining us from the Space Coast in Florida, where you should be in for some beautiful nighttime landing views. Moving up towards the top of the vehicle, once the first and second stages separate, the second stage will propel our payload into its intended orbit. The second stage for this mission is also debuting a new medium coast configuration. Just in case you didn't know, our second stages have 3 general configurations: standard, medium,
3 spacecraft, internal power, go for launch.
Hearing some chatter on the nets there. So we do use different configurations of that second stage, depending on how long the second stage needs to operate after launch. A medium coast kit, which is what we're using today, provides better performance for some missions and includes an added battery loaf or power pack, a painted gray stripe on the outside of the fuel tank, and other hardware to make sure the fuel and stages systems operate as long as needed once we get to space. If you look very closely just above the countdown clock on your screen, you can see that stripe of gray paint. While in space, the paint will absorb heat from the sun in order to keep the second stage fuel warm enough for our long flight today. Now, as a quick note, payload deployment for Jupiter 3 is scheduled to occur after 3 second stage engine burns and will take place around the T plus 3 hour and 30 minute mark. So hopefully you'll stick with us. Now, above the second stage is where our payload is safely enclosed inside of our carbon composite payload fairing halves. The fairing protects the payload from aerothermal loads, heating, and contamination during ascent. Once we reach the vacuum of space, though, the fairing isn't needed anymore, so we'll jettison the fairing halves as the second stage continues on its journey to orbit. Both fairing halves supporting today's mission are also flight-proven, just like our side boosters, with one half flying for its 5th time and the other for its 6th. We will be attempting to recover the fairing halves again today as well with our recovery vessel, Doug. And now, with just about T-minus 8 minutes and counting, here's a little bit more on our customer and our payload.
And if you're just joining us, welcome to the launch pad. My name is Dakota, and we are here out at Launch Complex 39A's press site at the NASA Kennedy Space Center, awaiting the launch of huge Jupiter 3 EchoStar 24 internet satellite aboard a SpaceX Falcon Heavy. SpaceX is currently targeting 11:04, meaning we are currently at T-minus 7 minutes and 35 seconds to launch. Currently sitting at just under 7 minutes to go, Falcon Heavy has begun engine chill. And with 6 minutes to go till launch, can we see that go, no go in the chat, everyone? Now we're currently sitting at 25% go on weather, so they're currently running the clock in hope of a gap in the weather. We'll be keeping an eye on that. But if you are just joining us, my name's Dakota, and welcome to the launch pad and tonight's coverage of the Jupiter 3 EchoStar 24 from the Launch Complex 39A press site at Kennedy Space Center. We are live down here 3 miles from the pad. SpaceX currently targeting 11:04 p.m., and we're currently sitting at T-minus 5 minutes. We appreciate y'all joining in. If you have any other questions before the rocket goes to space, go ahead and tag us at the launch pad. I'll be happy to answer your questions. And thank y'all once again for tuning in. Space is better together. And the only way that we truly progress is by coming together and seeing what's out there.
Control has commented that we are hearing or we're getting ready for strong back retract, which is when that large truss structure, or called the TE, or the strong back for short, will start to retract away from Falcon Heavy. Now, before we can retract the TE, the clamp arms have to open up from around the vehicle, which you can see on your screen right now, moving back into that fully retracted position. Now you have a great view on your screen of the strongback moving away from Falcon Heavy. Not only is the strongback being used right now to route umbilical lines up to the vehicle, it's also what we use to roll Falcon Heavy out to the launch pad and raise it into its vertical position. Just prior to liftoff, the strongback will retract all the way away from Falcon Heavy so that it can clear the launch pad.
And side core LOX loads are complete.
There's the call out that we're moving toward LOX load completion on Falcon Heavy.
Center core LOX load is complete.
There's the call out that the center core LOX load is complete. As always, those white clouds venting from around the side of Falcon Heavy are nothing to worry about. That's just some LOX boiling off the surface of the internal tanks on board the vehicle. And when that boiled off LOX comes into contact with the Florida air, it creates an actual cloud. Incredible views from the launch site down in Florida tonight.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
There's the final call out that LOX loading is complete on Falcon Heavy. That means that the next major flight milestone we're listening for is startup. When you hear Mission Control call out that Falcon Heavy has entered startup mode, that means that the internal flight computers have taken over the countdown. That's also the point during the countdown where Stage 1 and Stage 2 begin to pressurize for launch.
Ground gas closeouts. Falcon Heavy is in startup.
There's that call out that Falcon Heavy is in startup mode. With that, the only thing left is to hear Mission Control Launch Director give us the final go for launch.
Falcon Heavy, go for launch.
Great news out of Mission Control. So with just a little bit more than 30 seconds to go, all systems are go for the launch of Falcon Heavy and our Jupiter 3 spacecraft.
T-minus 30 seconds. Seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Engine full power. And liftoff from Falcon Heavy. Go Falcon 9. Go Falcon Heavy. Go EchoStar. Stage 1, chamber pressure is nominal.
We are just over 30 seconds into flight under the power of over 5 million pounds of thrust, and Falcon Heavy is on its way to space. Right now, we're throttling down in preparation for max Q, which is, of course, the moment of peak.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Callouts there that power and telemetry are both looking good for Falcon Heavy.
Falcon is supersonic.
Again, what we're preparing for next is max Q, which is the peak mechanical stress on the rocket. So that is a
Falcon is supersonic.
critical flight milestone for us today. And with that supersonic call out, we know that Falcon Heavy is moving faster than the speed of sound.
Max Q.
There we've passed through max Q. So now the engines are throttling up. Everything's looking good with the stage 1 trajectory, which is great news. Our side boosters are throttled all the way up right now, but the center core is operating at reduced power. We'll gradually begin reducing thrust from the side boosters to decrease forces on the vehicle structure as we approach our next major flight event, BECO. BECO, which stands for Booster Engine Cutoff, is expected at about 2.5 minutes into flight. That's where we'll shut down the engines on the side boosters, and then following BECO, the side boosters will separate away from the center core and begin their trip back to Earth. The center core engines will then ramp up to full power and burn for approximately another minute, while the side boosters execute their boost back burns simultaneously. Incredible views of Falcon Heavy right now. And as a reminder, although we are not attempting to recover our center core due to performance today, we will be attempting to land those 2 side boosters on landing zones 1 and 2, so we'll have great views for you on the right-hand side of your screen.
Side booster separation confirmed.
Side core separation.
There we've had confirmation of side core separation there. And shortly, those side boosters are going to begin the first of 3 burns prior to landing
Boost back startup.
back on land. There's the call out that we've had boost back begin. We're going to have several things happen in quick succession here. So some of the things we're looking for are MECO on our main engine, and then those 2 entry and landing burns of the side boosters. On your screen right now, we have views of both of those side boosters on their way back to Earth. There we go, over on the side right there. Following main engine cutoff of the center core, we are looking for stage separation of the center core and the second stage, and then SES-1, or second engine start 1, for the MVAC engine on board stage 2. Shortly after that, we will also have fairing separation, so let's keep an eye on all of those events happening back to back here in just a couple seconds.
Booster boost back shutdown.
There's confirmation that the boost back burn on both side boosters has
Stage
completed.
separation confirmed.
Acquisition signal for Muta.
Stage 1 FTS has saved center core.
MVAC ignition.
So you saw on your screen there, we had successful boost back burn on the side boosters, main engine cutoff on our center core, stage separation, and that beautiful view means that we have had second engine start 1. That will wrap it up.
Fairing separation confirmed.
That wraps it up for our center core and our fairing halves tonight. So while stage 2 now continues on its journey to space, those fairing halves are currently falling back to Earth.
All vehicles are following nominal trajectories.
With that, we know both vehicles, the center core and stage 2, are on nominal trajectories. And of course, we're going to try to recover those fairing halves again tonight using our recovery vessel, Doug. So next up, we'll be attempting to recover the 2 Falcon Heavy side boosters on land back at LZ-1 and LZ-2. Fun fact, Landing Zone 2 was built to support dual booster landings like the one we're attempting tonight. Now, at the time of separation, the side boosters were traveling slow enough to turn around and make their way back to land at those side-by-side landing pads. But they've picked up a lot of speed since then. So in just a few minutes, the side boosters will execute an entry burn, followed by a landing burn. Both of these burns are meant to slow the side boosters down rapid landing. If those landings are successful today, they will be the 211th and 212th landing of an orbital class rocket. But as I mentioned earlier, because of the additional performance required for this mission, the center core will be expended, and we're not attempting to recover it. Entry burn should begin for those side boosters in just about 10 seconds.
Side booster entry burn startup.
There's confirmation from mission control that the entry burn has begun. Now, each side booster has ignited just one engine in preparation for landing.
Side booster entry burn shut down.
There's confirmation that we have now shut down for the entry burn. Next coming up is our landing burn. And as a reminder, this will be a
Side boosters FTS has safed.
a 3-engine landing burn on each of those side boosters. Starting to get some initial views in from those side boosters as they come back to Florida, and expecting that landing burn to start here in just about 20 or 30 seconds.
Both side boosters are transonic.
Boosters are transonic on their way back to land at LZs 1 and 2.
Side booster landing burn.
Landing burn has started.
Side booster landing leg deploy. Dual side booster landing confirmed.
That is absolutely incredible, and as you can see, our team is thrilled.
Stage 2 FTS has safed.
With that, we have successfully landed both Falcon Heavy side boosters on landing zones 1 and 2. That marks the 211th and 212th overall successful landing of an orbital class rocket. Next up, in just about 10 seconds, we are looking for second engine cutoff 1 of the MVAC engine up in space.
Seco.
Confirmation of second engine cutoff 1.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And that's great news that we're in a good orbit. So at this point, we'll be heading into a coast phase until our second relight of the MVAC engine around the T+26 minute mark. We'll come back to bring you live coverage of that second burn in about 15 minutes. But until then, sit back and enjoy the space tunes.
Well, everyone, that's going to do it for us tonight, with 2 boosters back on the ground here at KSC and 1 booster falling back to Earth. Jupiter 3 is on its way to geostationary orbit. We appreciate y'all tuning in and joining us for the launch of Jupiter 3 aboard a Falcon Heavy. Have a wonderful evening or morning, depending on where you are. Be well and take care of one another, so together we can all inspire the explorers of tomorrow. My name's Dakota Wachter. Thank you for watching the Launchpad.